You know when you have a bruise and somebody kind of touches that?
My stupid brother used to do that to me all the time.
Well, Robin got some shots the other day. She even told me, be careful of my arm. And, I went to hug her and, And
then he just tries to rub it a little more gently. I'm like, stop touching. Ow.
So
just ow.
Yeah. So, but it's like if there's a tender spot in your story, and I'm the enemy, I'm going to make sure I get your spouse to touch that. With God, there is always more. More love, more life, more freedom. Welcome to Zoweh's Exploring More with Michael Thompson. C.S. Lewis once wrote, "Our Heavenly Father has provided many delightful ends for us along our journey, but He takes great care to see that we do not mistake any of them for home." Join me and the team as we explore the kingdom together, discovering the deep truths and offering encouragement for the journey. There is always more. Welcome, friends and allies, to the Exploring More podcast. I'm Michael Thompson, and I'm hanging out with my bride, Robin, and I've got one of our teammates and this couple, the Jennings, Sherry and SJ. You know SJ, and I think you know Sherry. You might, I know Sherry's voice.
I'd like to
know Sherry's voice from the past.
I've been on the podcast before.
Everybody knows Sherry.
But on this platform, now that we get to do some videos, this is a good chance to see what's known as the fabulous Sherry. I've heard her introduced that way many times by SJ. And we are continuing our journey and our exploration of isolation. And what does that look like? We've talked about what it looks like in the lives of men and the lives of women. Thank you for that, by the way, as you guys have explored this with me. What a big subject, what a big idea, what a big painful place to not only examine, but when we've had our turns or we've felt like that, when we've experienced that. And so I thought it was important to just round things off with what's isolation look like in marriage. Because when one of us is experiencing that in some way, directly, probably, indirectly at least, your spouse is going to experience that. If you're married and you're experiencing these symptoms of isolation and feeling alone, not seen, maybe not wanted, not pursued. These are all parts that really we're talking about a relational dynamic because we're made in a relational way. And isolation is an absence and a void of what good relationships would be or feel like. And so marriages, this may be one of the greatest contributors to breakups, to divorce. And, the drift of being isolated that leads you to, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to be with this person anymore. Or, having just multiple opportunities over the last several years to work with couples, to walk with couples. I just thought we got to talk about this because this is a place where isolation happens, sadly, in significant ways when it's the thing that I think God made for there to be goodness and not without bruises and bumps, emotionally and connecting. But, oh my gosh, this is something that's supposed to be so good and that we work through together. I heard something recently about just the promise of I will love you. I will be for you. And what that's supposed to do. I'll be with you. I mean, the whole ceremony.
Only you.
Oh, the whole ceremony, right? Yeah. All of that. And that's a beautiful, that's a beautiful thing. And yet it gets corrupted in different ways.
And I even think of something I just heard recently about how it could mean I don't have to face the world alone. I get to do this with you.
Because together we're better. right? Yeah.
Ideally, yes.
Except when we're not.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and the thing I thought of too, Michael, you've heard it 100 times, I'm sure, is that God has this tendency to bring two people together that are a little bit like sandpaper for one another, smoothing down some rough edges. So I know I'm better because of Sherry and the way that she's interacted with me, and I would hope that she would say the same. There's a intimacy in marriage, the way it's designed is designed to, I think it's a really simplified way to say it, but smooth down some of those rough edges. And there's nothing like that close or that intimate of a relationship to bring up what we would refer to as your false self.
Reveal the false self.
That's right. The revealing of these things that...
Yeah, I want to talk about that
if we have the eyes to see, God wants to maybe work out in us.
Yeah, we've all heard the idea that, there is something true. I know there's something true about opposites attract, and then if sandpaper is the gentlest way it can go, then you've got some friction, you've got some rubbing, and some, but if you don't see what that polishing, what that sanding is doing, and you're all in, then it's just like, ow, why did you say that? I mean, just even coming in here, if I'm honest, right? We're sitting together, we're getting ready, and I get, you need a piece of gum.
Did I say it like that?
No.
That's what I heard.
Yeah.
And that wasn't sandpaper. That felt like a coon, And I'm like, okay, I know
I didn't
she's.
say it.
So I had to turn down. I had to turn down several options of response that were thrown at me. Like, well, I don't like your sweater.
Yeah.
That, but I didn't say that. So,
or even you could have said that more nicely.
But
you're chewing gum.
I know.
Just saying.
Because I was told to. So, I mean, these are
and that's
things.
Just a piece of gum.
So here,
right?
my point is this: we're laughing about it. There are marriages where that is not funny.
That's right.
There was a time for us it wasn't funny.
And there's a time this afternoon where it's not going to be funny, maybe, or it goes in a different direction.
It can. You had a thought there in your marriage. It wasn't funny.
Well, I remember lots of times. Long stretches of times when that was not funny in our marriage, when there was very little that was funny, and everything felt like a jab or isolating.
And
there was an intentionality because there were times that I wanted to jab at you. I mean, it's amazing to think back in our stories, right, of those times where it wasn't going well, and even the littlest thing.
Yeah.
Right. Was like salt in a wound. It can get way off track.
Yeah. I want to let's stay on this track, but I want to come up for 1 second and kind of go to the whiteboard of what we've learned and what we share and teach in the Rendezvous Project, in our weekends, when we talk at the Women's Weekend, when we talk about the heart of a man, or in the Men's Weekend, when we talk about the heart of a woman. Sooner or later, we get to that point in that session where we talk about true self and false self, and so Robin has a true self and I have a true self. That's how we bear God's image. And that's what Jesus is resurrecting and redeeming and restoring and introducing us to. And there's qualities about her and me, as in the two of you, that are good. They are Christ-like. We are on a journey, right, to becoming more and more like him. So then there's this other character that we carry around, and I know I'm simplifying it on purpose, this false self made up of all kinds of things from our past and from our journeys. So in a short synopsis, in any given moment, let's use the gum and the breath. Robin, how she says that can be out of that. There's times on purpose when I was wanting to jab at you. So we'll say that's false self. And what does false self do?
Summons false self.
It provokes and summons the other person's false self. Sure. And if you don't understand anything else in this podcast about marriage and isolation, false self and false self are the chief culprits at this. Because they work with the enemy and the messages of the enemy, the kingdom of darkness, to bring isolation. That's their ultimate goal. If the ultimate goal is connectedness and intimacy and belonging, then we know what the enemy's ultimate goal is. If God designed us to connect and to belong and to find acceptance and worth and all those things that we've talked about in this series, then you can tell pretty much in a simple way the blueprint of the enemy's attacks and assaults on your heart and then therefore your marriage.
Yeah, I mean, take the good thing that God wants for us, whatever it is, and just say the enemy's out to steal, kill, and destroy that. It's really that simple.
And this is right out of Genesis. I mean, we know that this is marriage is a huge thing. And it's this place where it wasn't good for Adam to be alone, right? And he was with God in the garden. You're not alone, but no, there wasn't anybody suitable for him. And so the Ezer Kenegdo is created.
Man's perfect match.
His perfect match. So that's the ideal. And I want to kind of bring that in the context of this thing called isolation that we've been talking about for some different series, and say the false self and false self, woundedness and woundedness, that is the dynamic that is used to create this product, this experience, these symptoms that feel like I'm married, but I'm alone.
Yeah. Yeah. We use a chart at the weekends, and maybe we can put it up on the screen here. And it's this simple, there's 4 different scenarios, right? Between 2 different people as they interact. There's true self and true self, which is how God designed it and ordained it to be. And hopefully, when all is perfect again,
working well,
that is how it will always be, right? And then there's the true self and the false. And then the other way, maybe you have your true self summoned, Robin has her false self, or me and Sherry, whoever we want to talk about. And then there's false self on false self.
Which is the worst.
And I loved at the weekends, that first time I went to the weekend, I remembered that coming up on the screen. And you said, 3 out of 4 of these are what? And I immediately went to bad. This is they have no chance. They have your false self. When what? The opposite is true, right?
Yeah.
Because if you can summon your true self, if one of us has our true self summoned in the midst of the other person having their false self, then there's a chance.
To get through whatever it is.
Or some redemption.
That's provoking.
Maybe the true self can be called up. I mean, I remember in our story, many, many times after Sherry came to Jesus, I was false self dominant. I would run up against her true self, and she was unflappable because she was so centered on knowing on who she is and where she is in the story, and having Jesus at the center of her heart. So it's really interesting to think back of those moments, and even now, when we're doing some project at the house, and I have a tendency to get frustrated much more quickly than Sherry does. And she does a great job of summoning my true self in those moments, even now.
Yeah.
Well, and I'd like to say that even if we nosedive and your false self summons my false self, and it is, like you said, bad, a disaster, that even there, I think 4 out of 4 of those have a chance, because there is always what happens after. There is always the opportunity for repair. There's always opportunity for us to be curious and to step away, and the Spirit of God hopefully will begin to awaken and stir in one or both of our hearts.
That's good.
And move us towards, hey, Lovey, can I talk to you about what happened earlier?
Yeah. Have some questions, or that is right. That's the trick.
That's the skill, really, in a lot of ways.
But if you took a rock and put it in your pocket for every one of those that happened, and you run out of room in your pockets because you can't deal with that. You don't know how to deal with that. You weren't. Instead, you're holding scorecards, or you're holding these
a ledger,
demerits. But if they had some tangible something to them, like rocks, and you just had to keep putting them in your pockets, I mean, how long would it be before you're walking around with all these rocks on you? And it's with this other person. So those scores and scorekeeping I would rather, kind of, I was going to say take my ball somewhere else and play, but I'm taking my rocks somewhere else than enter into the kind of space that you're talking about. And that's isolation.
Yeah.
If I want to turn away and not enter into the harder conversations that can lend itself to the places that I really need to go. So if we believe this, and I just want to say this for our friends and allies, that if we believe that you're in my life to teach me how to love, and I'm in your life to teach you how to love, if that's what marriage is a journey of learning how to love one another, as I promised to do, right, then you're going to make mistakes. Things are going to get exposed. Things are going to come up. And I think that's where, I think the unwillingness to go there is a huge contributor to isolation. I'd rather go to work, or I'd rather go to a hobby. I'd rather go to the garage. I'd rather, somewhere where, because of the false self, and the dramatic way in which wounding, that's a very what's the highest? Not the sandpaper. There's different grades. What's the most coarse?
Like a brick.
Yes,
probably.
That's like brick. That's like brick.
Yeah, or a concrete block.
And it's not like brick on brick. It's like she has my arm and she's got the brick, and I have her arm and I got the brick.
That's exactly
it's that
right.
kind of. It's painful to be together. So the alternative, I don't want to be. Where can I be? That's not where you are. And when you get to those places, your marriage is in that really, really difficult, rough space of not one of you's isolating, but both of you now are. Entertaining thoughts that it's not worth it. This is not. I don't like this person. I don't want to be with this person. And it's just now you're kind of on autopilot with the enemy's ways and whispers and wounds.
Yeah, statistically, I would say it takes about 7 years before the rocks become too heavy in your mind if you're thinking that way. And I mean, if you look at the averages, it's about 7 years of marriage, and then you start to wander apart. And so, to figure out how to get rid of those rocks one at a time, and learn some of those skills, it really is a learned skill to be able to communicate and listen to one another.
Yeah.
And not listen to rebut or defend or, counterattack, but to really listen. And that's something that's been near and dear to our hearts, a long time. We've really, really been focusing on it. And Robin, I know you've done a lot of work on the listening guide. Sherry, you too, that's a part of the deepening journey. It's been a part of our medic program at the weekend for a number of years for the men. So, but we're continuing to learn and continuing to work on that, how to listen to one another. And I think what my experience has been is, I was carrying around, the pockets were full, my shirt pocket. I had a backpack.
My man purse.
Rocks.
My man purse is full.
My fanny pack had a bunch of rocks. But once you start pulling the rocks out, if you can do it one at a time and kind of learn how to do that, what I found to be true for me was then I was motivated to start dumping them out.
Yeah.
And there's some rocks that are bigger than others, that you feel like, okay, I can't just throw this one away. I need to have this addressed. I need to deal with this.
Yeah.
But there is a desire, I think, as you gain the momentum and come back towards one another away from isolation to continue that movement. And I understand, like we've talked about this throughout this podcast, this looks a little bit different for everybody. There's no absolutes here, right? Other than, I think, to your point, Robin, there is a chance. Sherry and I would have to say every marriage has a chance. You may not choose to pursue that chance, and that's up to you as individuals. But there is a you're right. You both have to choose. Yeah.
Where's this take you guys? Yeah, go ahead, Sherry.
Well, I just listening to you say, you get to learn to love Robin in your marriage, and she gets to learn to love you. And you're talking about learning to listen. And I'm just realizing in some of the conversations Robin and I have been having that it's all such a great opportunity. Yes, we learn it, but to practice it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, there's something really forgiving and grace-filled about practicing, because practicing says, I'm not going to do it perfectly, but I'm going to keep practicing because I want to love you better. I want to love you more fully and more completely and more with more curiosity and more grace and less judgment and less declarations, fewer declarations.
That sounds good to me.
Yeah. But it's so challenging. It's so challenging to do that if you're not willing to do that for yourself, with yourself,
Right.
to yourself.
Sure.
It's so hard to offer that, in some way that I'm not actually practicing that in my own healing journey.
Right.
So I want to just say time out before we take a break and say, hey, the priority is really your heart
Yeah.
and getting healing and doing your work and going into your story. That is the greatest thing you can do for your marriage. And in that space of isolation, and it's got to be so difficult. It just is when you're feeling the weight of all of that. And you really can't jump across whatever chasm is there and go after your spouse and fix them. The one thing that I think I want our friends and allies to know is a place that you could go, and it would take courage and strength to do so, is your story, your life, your side of the aisle, if you will, if there's such a thing in marriage, and be willing to move at, self-care, to move at what's in my story that is in some way gone down the aisle and into my marriage. I'm not saying that we're looking at, is it 50-50? I'm not even talking about the percentages of whose fault it is. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the opportunity to, like David prayed in the Psalms, is there any hurtful way in me? And yes, unforgiveness can grow roots there, and scorekeeping can grow roots there. And again, this is not something you just do in an afternoon or a weekend. I mean, but some of these things that are available, I'd love to talk after the break about, pursuing your heart, healing in your story, getting free from some of the things that, when you have a bruise and somebody kind of touches that.
My stupid brother used to do that to me all the time.
Well, Robin got some shots the other day. She even told me, be careful of my arm. And, I went to hug her and, and
then he just tries to rub it a little more gently. I'm like, stop touching.
Ow.
So,
Just ow.
yeah. So, but it's like if there's a tender spot in your story and I'm the enemy, I'm going to make sure I get your spouse to touch that. I'm going to figure out how do I maneuver and scheme in a way that makes your spouse hit that nerve, because there's a nerve to be hit.
As often as possible.
As often, because I know that over time that's going to lead to, this is not worth it.
Right.
All kind of agreements and statements like that. Why even try? The kind of things that we say in a reactionary way, and yet it's more than that. There's power in those words. There's power in those feelings, and they're many times very real.
Sure.
And that's the point. What is the gift of that pain? What is it inviting you to? What's it encouraging you to look at? So I want to talk about that when we come back on the Exploring More podcast in part 2. We'll be right back. We hope you have enjoyed this episode of Exploring More. The landing page for this podcast is zoweh.org/podcast. That's ZOWEH.org/podcast, where you can find the show notes and various platforms to which we broadcast. You can also find us and the Life of More by visiting Zoweh on YouVersion Bible app, Right Now Media, our Facebook page, and Zoweh on Instagram and Twitter. Remember, with God there is always more, and you were made for more.